All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really provocative piece, a dossier called the Red Trojan. And what it does is it lays out this case for a whole new kind of warfare. We're not talking about bombs or bullets here. It's about something way more subtle and maybe way more dangerous.
So, to kick things off, the author uses this quote from Sun Tzu to frame the entire argument. The idea here is that the ultimate victory, well, it's not one on some bloody battlefield. It's one inside the mind of your opponent. It's all about getting them to defeat themselves.
So right out of the gate, the article hits us with this massive question. But look, this isn't about a conventional war, with tanks and jets. No, it's asking about a totally different kind of conflict, a psychological one.
And here it is, the chilling answer that's really the core of this whole thing. The author argues that the real attack isn't aimed at a country's borders. It's aimed at its foundations, the trust we have in our institutions, in our leaders, maybe even in reality itself.
Okay, so Section 1. This is where the dossier starts to define this invisible war. And it makes a really bold claim that the most dangerous weapon in his new kind of conflict isn't some spy lurking in the shadows. Nope, it's a very public figure, someone they call the asset.
And this is where the dossier puts a name to it, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But, and this is a really important distinction the author makes, they say this investigation isn't about him as a politician, it's about how, in their view, he functions as a strategic asset for foreign governments.
So, the next logical question is, how does someone become an asset? Well, the author claims it's not by accident. The whole argument is built around a specific intelligence doctrine, one that's designed to manipulate a target's decisions, often with them having a clue it's even happening.
And to explain how this works, the author introduces this key term, pulled straight from the old KGB playbook: reflexive control. Now get this, the goal isn't to force someone to do something. It's way smarter than that. It's about feeding them just the right information so that they voluntarily make the exact decision you wanted them to make all along.
So, what makes someone the perfect soft target for this kind of thing? Well, according to the source, it's this specific cocktail of traits. The author suggests that a deep-seated grievance against an agency like the CIA, combined with, say, a powerful need for relevance outside of a famous family's shadow, and a susceptibility to, well, what they call magical thinking, all creates the ideal psychological profile for manipulation.
All right, moving on. This is where the article really tries to connect the dots, drawing a line from the subject directly to foreign powers. It builds its case around what it calls 3 pillars of influence. We're talking shared talking points, strategic funding, and even economic sabotage.
Okay, so take a look at this. This slide really drives home that first point about overlapping talking points. The author puts RFK Jr.'s stated reason for the Ukraine war right next to the Kremlin's official line. And the argument here is pretty blunt. This isn't a coincidence. It's a direct echo of a foreign power's narrative.
Next up, the dossier zooms in on this number: $25 million. That's the donation from a top donor, Timothy Mellon, to a super PAC backing the campaign. But the author's point is that we need to look past the surface of what seems like a simple political donation.
Because the allegation being made here is pretty explosive. It's that this money isn't about buying a candidate a win. It's about buying chaos. The idea is that the real goal is to fund maximum disruption, to destabilize the U.S. government from the inside, an outcome that, just happens to serve the interests of a rival power.
And then there's what the dossier calls the Chinese wellness trap. It's presented as this long-game strategy. The theory goes like this. You attack faith in regulated U.S. pharma. What happens? Well, you drive people toward the natural supplement market. And who, according to the article, controls that supply chain? China. So, in short, the allegation is that he's being used to weaken a major American industry for the direct benefit of a strategic competitor.
Okay, now we're getting into what the article itself admits are its most speculative claims. It starts to explore potential sources of blackmail, what Russian intelligence famously calls kompromat. The idea is simple. Your personal history can be turned into a weapon to control you.
So the source points to 2 things that have been widely reported: the subject's leaked diary and an admitted flight on Jeffrey Epstein's jet. But it reframes them completely through the lens of espionage. The argument is that in the world of intelligence, these aren't just juicy tabloid stories. They're potential vulnerabilities. They're leverage that a foreign adversary could, theoretically, use to exert control.
Now, this timeline is pretty crucial to the author's argument. It's used to make the case that the subject's rise to prominence wasn't just organic. The claim is that his ascent was actually manufactured, that it was timed perfectly to coincide with the launch of a Russian information war, and then supercharged by foreign bot farms to basically create a huge audience out of thin air.
All right, let's get into what is probably the most complex part of the argument. This is the idea that the subject's public critiques of American institutions, well, they aren't what they seem, that they are, in fact, a sophisticated form of psychological warfare.
So the theory goes like this. He's allowed to criticize the CIA of the 1960s. Why? Because it isn't a real threat to the powers that be. Instead, it's what spies call a limited hangout, a critique that's actually sanctioned. The author claims the real goal is to demoralize the American public, to convince patriotic people that their own government is the real enemy. And what does that do? It hollows out things like military support and national unity from the inside.
And it's not just about institutions. The dossier claims that even something that looks like scientific skepticism can be a cover for economic warfare. Take 5G skepticism. The author's logic is this. You stoke fear about 5G in the US, which slows down our tech adoption. Meanwhile, who's leading the world in 5G? China, with Huawei. The alleged result is that you're effectively lobbying for Chinese tech supremacy.
And all of this, all of it, builds to the article's final, and I've got to say, most dramatic prediction. The author argues that the real endgame here isn't just about elections or creating chaos, it's about something much bigger, conditioning the population for a future crisis.
To explain this, the dossier uses this really powerful metaphor. The point is that the ultimate damage isn't political, it's psychological. It's about completely rewiring how a population thinks, teaching them that a fire extinguisher is actually a flamethrower, so that when the fire eventually comes, they just let themselves burn.
And that's the endgame the source lays out, a truly dystopian conclusion. The ultimate goal, it alleges, isn't political victory. It's about weaponizing a part of the American population against its own survival instincts. The goal is to make sure that when the next biological crisis hits, whether it's natural or, God forbid, engineered, the country simply cannot defend itself.
So we'll end with the dossier's final and very provocative question to you. Are you watching a revolution or are you watching a demolition? Is what's being described a real, genuine grassroots movement, or is it a carefully planned demolition of a superpower from the inside out? We've laid out the arguments from the source. Now it's up to you to think about it.